For today's cup of coffee, I'm going to actually finally talk about the reason I started doing this paranormal, supernatural section. And I'm probably going to hum and haw more than I normally do because this is difficult for me. Because this is me owning up to what's been going on in my world for, it would be 10 years this month on the 22nd. And I've thought about breaking this up into different cups of coffee. May do that. Depends on how I can process. Yeah, so I'm just going to wing it, guys. And it's just a matter of me being real, which is something that I do try to articulate from time to time and enunciate a little bit better. But I'm authentic. This is it. This is my world. This is my life. And so I guess I sat and thought about making an outline so that I didn't get distracted. That's not going to happen because there's such a vast amount of information and things that have gone on that there's no way that I can condense 10 years into so many cups. And nobody wants to hear all that anyhow. So I just begin at the beginning. And it was a matter of my husband Michael, and had the first time that I saw him probably was around 2009, 2010. I was a corrections officer and he was a trustee, so he was on the other side of the glass. If you're wondering what he did, he had installed guttering and window screens for these people, and they did not pay him, and so he uninstalled them. And they gave him 7 years. Yeah. Because he had a record, they didn't. Michael had been horribly abused as a child, and I do mean horribly. So that's one of the key points to keep in mind during all this. The state of Tennessee, in their infinite wisdom, began incarcerating him when he was 12. Because kids that have been abused, that's about the time that they start acting out. And so a lot of times states don't understand about mental illness. Doesn't matter if it's in children, if it's in adults, all that. Michael had been trying to get my attention for a year. And I was, like I said, I was officer. And I was so policy and procedure. I was so by the book that it wasn't even funny. I was ideal as far as an officer. But it was interesting. The first time that I saw him, I was kitchen officer, and he was working on the serving line, and he was standing there with this stupid grin on his face, and I thought, there's something wrong with that man. And when I went back to the office, and when I see things, sometimes it's not with physical eyes, sometimes it is. But there are times that I get images, and it's almost like on the back of your brain. And I saw the color gold and wheat. And I thought, well, that's peculiar. And then I just went on. And for a year, he did try to get my attention, and it didn't. And one evening, there was this very tall inmate that we had, and he started talking to me about Michael. And Michael had actually written me a letter. Now, that was a big no-no. And it wasn't that I hadn't had other people try to slip me letters, and it's like, no, you throw that stuff away, and it's like, don't do that again, I'll write you up. But for some reason, from this man, and like I said, he was a big, tall guy, and I was not afraid of him at all. And he said, the boy says he's in love with you. I said, he's full of shit. And he said, well, yeah, he is, but he says he loves you. And I was like, really? And this man, he bent down, and he looked me in the eye, and he said, really? So I went back to the office, and I read the letter, and Michael had asked for me to give him some kind of sign or whatever. Now, I will say that I was just working out the rest of my time there at the jail because I had already taken a job as a mental health counselor at a local youth facility. And so I went in and I read it, and it was just something. And Michael was rolling the food cart down the hall, and I looked at him and I said, Are you serious? And he said, I've never been more serious about anything in my life. And I said, are you in here on any kind of drug or alcohol charge? Because I will not bring that into my home or around my child. And he said, no. And he was not. He had never had a drug charge. And so that morning, about 2 or 3 o'clock, because when you were kitchen officer, you also had other posts and stuff that you had to do, I went down to booking, where and it was across the hall was the open pod where Michael was. And all I could see was this little silhouette standing in the window waiting. And so out of view of the camera, I simply thumbs up, nodded my head. And that was it. And the gentleman that we called Cupid for a long time, his name was Mr. Hagee. He was shipped to someplace else. These people didn't know any of this, what had happened. He was shipped out that morning. And as soon as I turned around from giving Michael the signal, it hit me. And I went and sent a text to a friend of mine. I said, I think I just married this man. And I knew it in my spirit, and it was a God thing from the get-go. And I will spare you all. That'll be for another thing as far as the harassment that we went through. Even though I no longer worked there, you would have thought that we were a 1950s interracial couple, because that he had been on the other side of the glass. It was horrific. Anyhow, the wedding date that God married us was February 22nd, 2011. And so that's when the 22s and the 11s started. And so Michael, God would make ways. He would always make ways. The jail would do something, and God would make a way to counter what they had done. As far as them denying me visitation, Michael had a partial, and his partial broke. So God made a way that I was able to take this man to a dentist. And on the first furlough, a friend of mine who also used to work at the jail, her husband was a licensed minister. And so on the way back, we got married. And so that was just, and miracles after miracles. When somebody has a criminal record, it's very difficult for them to find employment and different things like that. We developed a lawn care service in, I think that was, the youth center closed down in January 2012. There were so many stressors that you could honestly, literally plot it on a graph. And I took a job as an intensive in-home counselor for Highlands Community Behavioral Services in 2012, because it was a matter of having a stable income. The lawn care service, that's a very seasonal type of work. And Michael was the most incredible man that I had ever met. And it did not matter that he had not had the educational opportunities that I had had. Anything I wanted to discuss, whether it was world religion or politics or art or whatever, he was willing to learn. And he could always give you wonderful answers, you know. But I noticed when I started working at Highlands and stuff, and he got other people to fill the position that I had, because one person can't do it all with lawn care, that there was a change, you know, and I thought, okay. Now, he had a history of drug usage, because you can't go through the type of abuse that he did and not try to find some way to cope with what was going on. So I started wondering, it's like, okay, is he relapsing? What's going on here? I had, one time I had said something, and his response was totally not, you know, what it should have been, considering what I had said. And I asked him, I said, what did you hear? And when he told me what he had heard, it was totally opposite of what I had said. And I thought, okay, this is a problem. And so there was a strain on the relationship. I need $30 for this, I need $30 for that, and I just, the denial. the denial of the possibility of relapse, different things like that. And so at a certain point, it was a matter of him recognizing that he had some kind of an anger issue in him. And he said, look, he said, I have got to get this out of me because I'm afraid that I will say something that will make you or youngest kid hate me. And I'm like, what is this? He's like, I don't know. It's this anger. It's this rage. He has to go up to my mother's cabin for a few days to try to process. And that when he left, that was, and that exact date, normally I can tell you, I know it was in May of 2013. It was before this great conjunction, so it may have been around the 23rd or something like that. In my world, that was when my world blew up. And I'm still trying to pick up the pieces. And so I cried out to God because I was just crushed. And I will say that I did not have the relationship with God at that time that I do today. And when I went back to the bedroom, and almost I just wanted to scream. And this inner voice, and this comes when God speaks. This is from heart area, solar plexus area. And the word said, be calm, be still, trust. And I'm like, trust in what? And the voice said, trust that I am God. And for 9 months, it was a level of hell like I have never even thought of experiencing. And Michael was not thoroughly out of contact with me until like July. And then there were still sporadic times of contact. People calling me in the area going, do you know what your husband's doing? Your husband says he wants a divorce. You're this and that and the other. He's with this person. He's with that person. You deserve better. There were police in 2 states, 2 counties in Virginia, all this stuff. But one of the first nights that Michael was up at the cabin, he sent me a text and he said, I'm looking in the mirror and I don't know who I see. And I thought, okay, that's peculiar. And going through all this and trying to live through it. And there were times that I didn't want to. And there were times that I had asked God, take me home. Because part of what I was doing was I was interceding for Michael. And I was carrying part of the pain that he had had in him since he was born. Because the abuse started very early in his life. And I thought it would crush me. But during that period of time, more miracles. I could feel God thick on my skin. And it's like every time I opened my mouth, God would roll out. And so that was one of the most incredible experiences. And it was words of knowledge. I would know these things. And people's like, you're crazy, until they happened. And a friend of mine, she and her husband, she has the gift of words of knowledge also. She said he'll be home before the end of January. All right, 2014, the last day of January, I get a call, and Michael's like, if you still want me, come get me. And the people that he was staying with had thrown him out. Oh, he had caught another charge. That November, they had taken him to a Sullivan County Walmart. They had shoplifted. He had had money. His wallet ended up disappearing. And so they walked from the charges and he didn't. But when he came home in January, his level of self-care, he had not, his hair had not been cut in 9 months. His clothing was filthy. And, Michael was always just fastidious. And he was at such a level of dysfunction, I had to put him in the bathtub and bathe him like a small child. He had lost so much weight that he was wearing the clothing of my oldest kid when he was in middle school. And so he was almost dead. And it was one of those that, trying to stabilize him. And and had called the local Mount Rogers Community Services Board because I owe them nothing. And it was the eve of Super Bowl Sunday. And I said, look, he's in crisis. I need help. And they're like, well, just use distraction techniques until tomorrow during normal business hours. That didn't work so good. Because Michael went into a flashback of the childhood abuse. And I could not call him back to present time. And he was staring at the basement wall, just eyes fixed, tears rolling down his face, mouth agape. And it was a matter of his uncles hurting him. And he's like, they're hurting me. And I touched him on the knee. I said, where are they hurting you, baby? Are they hurting you here? Are they hurting you here? I touched his arm. He said, they're hurting me everywhere. And that triggered the fight-flight response. And so I could not physically restrain him. And he said that he was going to walk basically a mile. He left out, he had no phone, no nothing. I think he may have had a comb. And so I didn't see him again until February the 16th. And if you've ever had the misfortune of having to call and report a missing person, and then for the police to come back and say, we can't find them. Now, in these mountains, if somebody does not want to be found, they're not going to be found. So 2 weeks later, it was on February the 16th of 2014, and it had snowed. And I was outside messing with the gas cap of our truck. And at just that time, God's timing was just impeccable. It always is. We just are not always cognizant of it. A family friend pulled up in the driveway, and he's like, hey, what are you doing? I said, I'm fighting with this gas cap. And he said, I just happen to have a mechanic with me. I said, well, tell him to get out here. I'm tired of fighting with this thing. And when I turned around, there was my husband. And I ran to him, even in the snow. I don't know how I did not bust my ass, but I ran to him. And I knew that he had been in a fight because there was a red spot on his cheek. And so brought him back inside. And over the next couple of days, realized Michael had little to no working memory of 9 months. You know, and it's like I was standing here in the living room, and he's like, you lost weight. And I turned around snarky because I was angry and I didn't understand. And I said, yeah, 9 months of fasting and prayer will do that to you. And I looked at him, and the look of shock on his face. And he said what happened that morning was that it was almost like he woke up. He was someplace that he didn't know. He did know the guy that he was staying with. And a voice inside him said, go home. And so he had walked probably about 13 miles to get to the family friend's house, the one that finally brought him home. And then it was a matter of trying to get him medical help, trying to figure out what was wrong with him, trying to get the psychological counseling and the assessments done. That's fun, especially if you've got somebody that's facing a criminal charge. It doesn't matter how petty the charge is. You're not going to get the same level of treatment. And so once again, in spite of the fact that he had a psychological diagnosis, and I still have power of attorney so I can legally say this, the psychiatrist said, what is wrong with him? I said, it's a matter, because I had seen the different personalities. I said, he has dissociative identity disorder. And so he was diagnosed, because DID is a very controversial diagnosis. They used to call it multiple personality. They had bipolar with psychotic features, and PTSD, and then the DID was the tertiary. And when you're going through the court system, they don't care. But trying to get Michael help, we were coming back from Charlottesville one time, and he looked at me and he's like, I feel like somebody is erasing my memory. And I said one of the most stupid things that has ever flown out of my mouth, and there's been a lot of stupid that's come out. I said, "Can you remember what you forgot?" And he just looked at me and he went, "No." And I'm like, that was remarkably stupid, wasn't it? Give me just a second to readjust my camera. And to take a breath. Because this is hard. That part has gotten easy to tell. I've told that in other videos and stuff before. Michael was sentenced to 5 years. And I filed the Tennessee Department of Corrections. Oh my God, I filed the Tennessee Department of Corrections. And I was the only form of therapy Michael had. And at that point, other people have reported, hey, he's walking around the pod talking to people that we can't see. It was a matter of trying to get him some kind of psychological help, trying to keep him out of trouble as far as someone hurting him or him hurting someone, because the type of PTSD that he has, and it's understandable, if somebody hits him, he will hit back, and he's trained. He was trained by his family. And without throwing off on his family too much, yeah, he was raised in a war zone. You know, why didn't somebody stop the abuse? Why didn't somebody say, hey, what's wrong with him? So we finally got him back home after the 5 years in September of 2019. And youngest kid and I both knew, I mean, you know, 5 years in prison is going to change anybody, but there was something not right. And so we brought Michael home, and he was basically incapacitated. Now, he could do self-care and stuff like that, but you had to ask him, did you eat? Did you do this? You know, different things like that. He was not our Michael at all. For him to sit here on the couch and different ones of him, the different ones that were inside of him, to have a conversation with each other. Now, that was interesting. And I thought, okay, well, this is the DID. And my therapist, her area of concentration is DID. Now, that was a God thing. And when I would take Michael, you know, we would have like group therapy and stuff, and she would sit there and she would be like, this manifests differently than anything that I've ever seen. And I'm like, okay. And then some of the other odd things we started noticing, such as you could be anywhere on this property whispering and he would know exactly what you said. I have actually gone to my mother's before where he wasn't even, you know, he was here with Clay. We never left him alone because we were concerned that he would switch into one of the other ones and would be gone again. I have been at my mother's talking to her, and he could repeat verbatim what our conversation was. And so that was when it's like, what? And there was one of him, one that's inside of him, that had named itself Sam. We had called it the anti-Michael because it was polar opposite of the man that I married. And then there was another one that we called Little Michael, which we thought was child, you know. And so as far as he knew, there were 3. And it got to where Sam was present. The man that I married, of the almost 1 year that he was here, I don't even know if he was present a half an hour. But it was a matter of saying, look, this is what happened, processing it, because I was processing my trauma too. Had him in therapy. There were still complaints constantly of these horrific back spasms, different things like that. Had him physical therapy, had you know, spinal imaging with contrast dye, had you know, it was a cranial MRI. It was actually a brain MRI because I wanted to make sure that he didn't have some kind of tumor, that there wasn't some kind of injury because, you know, he grew up rough. Make sure that there was not some kind of damage done by drugs. Nothing showed up on the MRIs. Nothing. He ended up in the ER more than once with these horrific back spasms. Now, I'm very much acquainted with seeking behavior of addicts. But you can't fake a back spasm for 3 or 4 hours to the point that you are shaking. Nobody can do that. So whatever this was, physically tormented him. And then there were just, like I said, other really odd paranormal things. The crux was in September, I think it was on September the 6th, he got the news that his grandmother had passed. And because of the expense of while he was incarcerated and stuff like that, I mean, I've got a 2004 Toyota Corolla with about 400,000 miles, no kidding. And praise God, it's still rolling. So I told him, I said, there is no way that the Ghetto Mobile is going to make it down to Tennessee, which where he was is 8 or 9 hours from us. And I didn't want to go because I knew what that was about, because I know his family. Now, for 5 years, they never contacted him, never contacted me, nothing. And he had a cousin that was in the Navy that had recently been diagnosed with brain cancer, actually had to have brain surgery. And this individual's like, okay, I will come and get Michael. I'll take him down there and we'll bring him back. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. And had explained to the cousin's wife, I said, look, this is the diagnosis. Please do not let him out of your sight, because if he switches into one of the other personalities, you know, we may never find him again. Okay, I understand all this stuff. And that was the last time that I saw Michael. I got a call on September the 9th, and I knew that it was who we call Little Michael, saying, I just saw Grandma. And I said, I understand that hurts, but that's not your grandma. That's just the vehicle she was driving. Your grandma's not there. And that, like I said, that was the last I heard. And so this was a planned effort by his family to take him back to Dyersburg, and to keep him there. Now, the folks here that have been with me on YouTube for a while, they were actually present one day, and I do believe it was either October or November, when my husband's screen name came up on the video that day, saying that it was him. Now, his mother, who is a blazing alcoholic, had called later and wanted to know, how did he get in touch with you? And I simply said, through the internet. He's never gotten in touch again. Now, why do I think that this is a matter of demonic possession? Because the entity that had taken him over, the day that he was going to leave, I knew who it was I was talking to, because I had talked to it before, and it was not my husband. And it sat right out there on the porch and said, I'm being nice. I'm asking permission. Any other time, I would just leave. And I thought, I know who you are. And I'm not convinced that the one that we called Little Michael was not yet another unclean spirit, because the analogy that kept coming to mind was from Interview with the Vampire, the character Claudia. Now, Claudia was in a child's body, but was not a child. And whatever this is, very well could have presented at times as a child, because adults normally want to protect children and different things like that. But it did not have the behavior of a child. When Michael came home, and it's like, okay, let's help him process any of the things that I had gotten that a kid that age would like, he wouldn't have anything to do with it. And so I'm not, it very well could be that the one that we thought was the youngest entity could have been the one over all of them. And as far as some of the other supernatural things that we had happen, there was no talking to, I mean, no reasoning with him. If he wanted something, he wanted it. He wanted it then. Did not matter, what happened. Our finances have been strapped for years. I've been unemployed since 2013. That was Highlands. Yeah, thank you, Highlands, because when Michael got sick the first time, they decided to unfriend me, deny me unemployment. Never been able to get a job since. Anyhow, nothing was ever enough. It didn't matter if you got him this, he wanted something else, and was just insistent. And one of the things was an external TV antenna. I haven't had the TV since 2013 because there's nothing on it that I want to watch. We tried to explain to him, look, we're in the mountains. This is not going to work. Nope, not going to have it. When we were taking this thing down, it had a hardwired end on the cable that went through a hole in the floor. Youngest kid tried to put it back through the hole in the floor, and he's like, this doesn't fit. It was not a matter of the wood swelling. There was no way in hell that he had to cut the end off of the cable because it would not fit down through that hole. So that was one of those odd things. There's been lots of other odd things that we will have happen from time to time. Somebody had asked me, it's like, look, did you smudge your house? It's like, absolutely. And have smudged it more than once. And so, still trying to figure out what God is doing with this. Because it was demonic. Something that is demonic is going to try to destroy anything and everybody. And so this was more than mental illness. The different ones had different handwriting styles. The laughs were different on all of them. It was interesting that he could not look you in the eye. And that's always a telltale thing. That was not my husband. The almost year, he didn't make it quite a year, I grieved daily because it was like a zombie. It was his body, but it was not him. And so this is what I've been dealing with for a minute. And when I had found this quote from The Exorcist, I actually did finally get my copy today, but found this the other night, and it just explained it perfectly. And so, a quote on this from William Peter Blatty, The Exorcist. But I'll tell you something, Father. You give me Reagan's identical twin. Same face, same voice, same smell, same everything down to the way she dots her eyes, and still I'd know in a second that it wasn't really her. I'd know it in my gut, and I'm telling you, I know that thing upstairs is not my daughter. I know it, I know. End quote. The reason I bought the book, because I thought this man has an understanding of this. And as a believer, we're supposed to have understandings of this. Now, when Michael first came home in 2014, I did take him to a local church, and I told them, I said, you cast this thing out of him. And the men did pray, but they didn't have the power. So we sit and we wait on God, and I do lift my husband up to God daily, because it's like living with his ghost. He's not here, his body's not here, but his presence, his essence, it's never gone. And so, trying to make sure that that's not a form of psychic vampirism or anything like that. Demonic possession is real, folks. This was not, I've seen addiction. This ain't it. I've seen mental illness. This ain't it. So I've even seen people become possessed before, but not to this level. Trying to edify myself about this, there is something that is called transient possession. which means they're not possessed all the time. And I'm like, oh, that's what this is. Now, why God put me in the middle of this, I don't know. I didn't want this knowledge. I certainly did not want to be an exorcist. That was not on my bucket list. But it is what it is. And it's a matter of trusting that God will do only what God can do. And then tomorrow, that's the big story. That's the one I have been hesitating on telling. But it's told now. Love you guys. You all have a beautiful, blessed day.